Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
It's me, Egbert, once again. I'm the new owner of this station. I went out and hired the best talk radio consultant, Jeff Allen from News Talk STL, and told him to hire the worst talent he could find. Jeff did exactly as I told him. Ladies and gentlemen, here are Brad and John.
You know, over the weekend, John, I found a story that I found fascinating, and I wanted to run this by you. The FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, has done something for farmers. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
The FAA has given a company, I can't find the name of the company right off the top here, but essentially they've made an exemption to the FAA rules for drones because these companies come out and they have these drones which they say can spread fertilizer and seeds much faster and much more efficiently and much cheaper than the traditional method of having a farmer in a tractor pull a seeder or you know, a seed hammer or whatever they call it, hammer drill, or you know what I'm talking about?
I do, yeah, and I don't mean to interrupt. I spent a bit of time at the company working on this, Brad. So yeah, I didn't see the FAA announcement, but that's great news for some of these companies like Ag Eagle, which is based in Kansas. They're a leader in that ticker symbol UAVS. I'm not a shareholder, so I am not compromised here. But yeah, Brad, and drones can do great thing for farmers. I interrupted your story, but go ahead.
It's called drone swarm farming, okay? And the FAA new exemption for drone piloting. The Federal Aviation Administration has cleared the airways for drone swarm agriculture, a method of seeding and spraying crops at a fraction of traditional cost. Hylio, H-Y-L-I-O, a Texas-based drone manufacturer, successfully applied for an exemption from the FAA rules to allow fleets of drones weighing 55 pounds or more to fly together. It's the first exemption of its kind for machines that could carry what the company calls a meaningful payload and makes the process competitive with traditional tractors and seeding rigs. Quote, on average, you're seeding a quarter both up front. Capital cost to buy the machinery and operating cost is about a quarter or maybe a third of what you'd spend for traditional stuff. In other words, this is the guy from the CEO from this company called, I guess it's called Hylio, H-Y-L-I-O. And essentially what they did was they changed the rules so that instead of having one pilot and one observer for each drone, you could now have 3 drones with only one pilot and one observer. So essentially what they do is they would, and you know about this, they would put all the GPS coordinates into the system, and the drones would fly and they would seed or drop, I guess, Roundup and stuff like that, right? Fertilizer, all that kind of stuff?
You can use spray applications. And in fact, so this technology has been used for years, and some of the earliest places where it was used, Brad, were in rice fields, because instead of having anybody who's seen a rice paddy, even a visual of it, knows, and instead of wading through the muck of a rice paddy or flying a small plane over it, you can just do the exact same work with a drone. And it's amazing. And it's amazing for labor. It's amazing for inputs. Farmers don't want to spend, one of the biggest misconceptions about farmers as it relates to pesticides or fertilizer is that farmers are just dousing their fields in this stuff. Farmers don't want to spend one dime more than they have to, Brad. Like, farmers don't want to waste an ounce of herbicide application or fertilizer. So these type of precision applications are so valuable to farmers.
Yeah, it says a set of 3 drones costs substantially less than a single tractor. They use less water to carry chemicals, causing less soil compaction and only a fraction of the fuel. And what they do is, this is sort of interesting. This company that has this, they take generators, portable generators out into the field, and that's how they recharge the drones.
Yeah.
And then so under the previous rule, a single drone required a pilot, another person acting as a spotter. The new rules allow the same team of a pilot and a spotter to handle 3 drones simultaneously. So I found that fascinating because, you never think about that. And it talked about the fact that the guy from Hylio talks about the fact that typically if a farmer would go buy a new tractor, we're in the $200,000 to $500,000 range. When you say that, people will go like, huh? Yes, when you drive by and you look at some of those farmers out in the fields, he may be on a $500,000 tractor. And you're going
likely. Yeah, and by the way, Brad, whatever quote there was, I don't know a guy that can get a used planting equipment for 200 grand. So you're gonna be closer to the $500,000 mark for that.
And this is John Combest, who worked at Monsanto, and also you toured around the country and to a certain extent around the world. Didn't you go and look at farming in other countries as well too?
Yeah, I didn't do global travels to work with farmers, but throughout the United States, and most of where I spent my time was in the Cotton Belt. So think from Arizona over to Georgia. And the planting equipment out there. And the really cool thing too, Brad, and most folks have probably heard about this, is that, but just now in general, you can get in your planter or your harvesting equipment and you can listen to a podcast and your John Deere or your Case IH drives itself.
Right.
And you're in the cab just to make sure that nothing wacky goes on and to keep an eye on stuff. And guys like to take a look at, but for the most part, you can take a look at real-time harvest numbers as they're coming in every part of the field. And the amount of data that you can capture in farming today is just it was unheard of 15 years ago, Brad, much less 30 years ago.
The nerd in me, I watched several videos on this, and it's fascinating because of the fact that there's companies that, like, let's say you have like a 40-acre plot. Companies will come in and analyze the soil in that 40-acre plot, which can vary from 1 acre to the next. And they plug that into a computer system, and it compensates for the amount of fertilizer or the amount of seeds it drops in a certain area as opposed to the next acre over. And you go like, holy cow. I mean,
you're exactly right. And one of the coolest things, just anecdotally, if folks think about their backyard garden, they've seen this if you've ever had a garden and, you have a big rainfall and you got an area of your 10 by 10 garden that doesn't drain that well. Over in our Chesterfield office, I worked with a lot of guys that worked on soil biology. So what you can do, Brad, is you can take a look at a map on a field and say, when you're looking at your harvest results and how your crops did that year, you can look at the map and say, hey, this 3 foot by 3 foot area right here had a lot of ponding, like it had a lot of standing water. So those 4 corn plants that were in that area, we're going to remove them from the sample because we know they were flooded, they didn't perform well, and we're only going to look at the crops that are, we're only going to look at the plants that actually emerged and had real yield. It's just amazing where you can go foot by foot now in the soil.
They would really go down to like a small little section like that?
Oh,
like
a square
yard?
I would meet with the guys and they'd show, and we did this with journalists all the time. And as you can imagine, Brad, it blew their minds. I remember I worked with a reporter that from Scientific American, and we could show her just in one of our test fields, okay, this area over here had a little bit of ponding in the southwest corner. So we threw out those data results because we knew that the soil bacteria would probably get washed away or whatever. Yeah, you can do that. And it's just like anything else in technology, Brad. It becomes cheaper and cheaper every year that goes on. This technology that was once prohibitively the technology that at one time only the Monsantos and the DuPonts of the world had access to, a farmer can get it now for next to nothing.
Interesting. Sort of like computers. I remember I bought my first computer when I went into business with my traffic network back in 1984, an IBM PC, 56K of memory, no hard drive, a monochrome monitor, $3,700. Okay, now
I believe it.
For 30.
But Brad, also too, one more thing on this is that as you can imagine, like anything in technology, if you're a farmer and let's say you're in Franklin County and you got 100 acres of corn and 100 acres of soy, you can get just about any company to give you a free data technology, all their software. In return, Brad, you have to give them all your planting information and your yield results. So for a lot of farmers, it's a pretty good deal. You say, well, I don't care. I'll give the company my data. And then think of how many data points the company has throughout the world. If you're any of these technology companies, then you're able to go in and say, hey, this corn hybrid performs really well in sandy soil in this specific latitude. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. And once again, they're helping the farmer. It's a two-way street. The
Absolutely.
The farmer is getting a better yield because of the fact that the company is helping them, and in return, the company's getting that farmer's business. I get it.
You're absolutely right.
I mean, it's the old win-win situation, the best deal in business. Okay.
You're absolutely.
Next thing, you hear about these recalls all the time. I saw this story the other day, and I thought to myself, holy cow, 3.7 million cars in the United States currently are on the park outside recall list. You know what the park outside recall list is?
No, but I'm guessing, do they spontaneously combust?
Well, do you park your car in your garage?
I do.
Okay, if you had one of these cars, you would be told, you would get a recall notice from the manufacturer saying, hey, we need to take a look at your car for possible, a self-ignition. And we're not talking turning the ignition on, we're talking the car catching fire. But until we get around to it, don't park it in your garage and don't park it close to your house.
Wow. So how did this happen?
Well, there's all sorts of different cars involved. It depends on what's wrong. It said, here's a story, a 40% increase in cars with those recalls nationwide since May of 2023. For example, in Atlanta, for instance, there were 113,000 cars on the road with park outside recalls in January. That's up from roughly 64,000 vehicles reported in May of 2023. And California has 368,000 cars with park outside recalls on the road as of January. About 189,000 of those were concentrated in the greater Los Angeles area. It's a staggering jump from nearly 93,000 cars who recalls in 2023. Now, part of this is, what they don't say is, these are electric. Some of these are electric cars. And
there you go.
there was a situation which happened locally, I think it was maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, where this is over on 255 over Madison County, north of 270, where it technically, it's sort of weird if you know the whole situation over there. 255 is the interstate until it crosses over 270. Then it turns into State Route 255. Don't ask me why, but it's sort of complicated. Essentially, a Tesla caught on fire, and it took 3 hours to put the car out. They had to completely shut down both directions of 255, and including the fire department coming out there. Then they had the hazmat crews that have to come out there because of the fact that apparently there's some kind of chemical reaction when they are putting the fire out. They put the water on the fire, and the fire creates some kind of a weird chemical.
Is it because of the lithium, or is it because of the battery components?
It's something to do with what's in the battery. In other words, it's a reaction. If you've ever seen this, like you've seen some of these scientific little experiments where they drop various chemicals into water and sometimes they explode and things like that.
Yeah, wow.
So some of these chemicals involved, and essentially what happens with the batteries, they get in what they call thermal runaway, where essentially it's sort of like a closed loop where no matter what, you can't get the thing out of, can't put it out there. There's a story I saw recently of a Tesla that somebody had a car fire or something like that, and they ran it off the dock into the lake, and the car submerged, and it was still on fire. It was under.
Well, that sounds like a feature, not a bug, right, Brad?
Maybe so. So anyway, there's all these park outside recalls, essentially. So the idea being is that the cars could, sitting in your garage, just catch on fire. So what does that tell you about the state of our car industry? Okay, last but not least this morning. Did you, by any chance, have you heard the Chuck Todd meltdown story?
No, I haven't heard this.
You don't know about this?
No, I don't.
Chuck Todd, who is the former host of Meet the Press on NBC, was on Meet the Press yesterday with the new lady. Who's the new lady who runs it? She's what's her name?
I don't watch Meet the Press.
Kristen Welker. Okay, she conducted a interview last week with the newest staff member of NBC News. You know who the newest staff member of NBC News is?
Ronna McDaniel.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And I use quote marks, journalists, quote unquote, at NBC are up in arms that how dare they hire someone who used to be the head of the Republican National Committee. How dare they?
A black mark on her character for associated with Trump.
Right. How dare they hire someone who actually worked with Donald Trump and maybe even
you can't have that.
Maybe even liked him. I mean, far
horrible. Yeah.
Although
that's just terrible.
The irony of the situation is, what's funny is guess who got Ronna McDaniel out of the job? Trump. So
Donald Trump, absolutely.
Right?
He did.
So
what did Chuck Todd do?
Oh my, he was. I mean, I've seen.
Was he on the air when this happened?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I missed this.
But see, part of it was they're talking about a fact that Kristen Welker had to do a welcoming interview with Ronna McDaniel. And
the humiliation. I mean, how could she? I mean, how could she be that professional to ask questions of another adult in a civilized way?
Okay, here's a quote from what Chuck Todd said on the show yesterday, and I'm quoting this word for word. "Let me deal with the elephant in the room. I think our bosses owe you an apology for putting you in this situation because I don't know what to believe." He's essentially saying that the NBC executives owe Kristen Welker an apology for making her interview Rona McDaniel. That would be like
incredible.
That would be like me saying to you, John, next week we're gonna put who would we put on here? We're gonna put Tashara Jones on the show, and you have to interview her. And you go, "Oh, I'm not doing that, Brad.
I don't want to, because you know what? She voted for Joey Biden.
Right.
She, you know what? She shook hands with Barack Obama. I ain't gonna talk to her.
And once again, I put on my journalism hat. Once again, I have 2 worthless degrees, journalism. What does this tell you about the state of journalism when almost to a person, that's what they're saying, almost everyone at NBC News is complaining about the fact that they hired Rona McDaniel. Now, once again, if you are a journalist, you essentially don't show any biases. You're supposed to be middle down the middle, supposed to be, a little bit left, a little bit right, but you're not supposed to be, well, I can't believe they hired her. But it just goes
old school of you, Brad.
Well, it just goes to show you how incredibly biased, quote unquote, the mainstream media, which obviously NBC News is, and especially when Chuck Todd comes on and trashes this woman. Now, once again, I'm no Rona McDaniel fan. Matter of fact, if anything, a lot of people say that she was too middle of the road.
Yeah, I would happen to agree with that.
That she was not enough right wing. That's why. And the reason they said that was because, well, look who she's related to. What is she?
They're holding her accountable for Mitt Romney.
What? She's Mitt Romney's. Isn't like Mitt Romney her
like
uncle
niece
or something? Yeah,
like that.
like she's the niece of Mitt Romney. So they're essentially saying, like, okay, so I'm going like, okay, no, hold on a minute now, you NBC people. She's not like a bomb thrower. That's why she sort of got booted out of the RNC, because of the fact that she wasn't bomb thrower enough as far as the right wingers are concerned, right?
And what it shows, Brad. I know it's 8:00 now, but what it shows is that how far apart from mainstream society journalists are. You listen to Mark Reardon, he can have Democrats and Republicans on, and they can be civilized. Not in mainstream national media.
Well, but see, that's why I love listening to him on Friday.
Absolutely, you're right.
They have Jen Duker on, who's very much of a Democrat. You have Steve Butts, who talked about that. And yet they can come together and talk together and all agree that the squatter down in South City is wrong, which is...
I can't even tell you how many things that have been said that are just wrong, Brad.
Like, what do you mean? Like how many things said? Like something like this?
And you shall feel the pythons, brother.
Or something like this?
Apparently it was a popular decision.
Or something like this?
And that's for you, smart guy.
I can't hear that on my end, but I bet it's MEC.
You're not Ric Flair. Well, it's the same old story with this weasel, man. Apparently it was a popular decision.
How about that?
Phenomenal.
Did I make your day, John?
It's fantastic. They're really good. They take me back, Brad. They take me back down memory lane.
You shall feel the wrath of Hulkamania.
You shall, and I'm going to whip out my 24-inch pythons, but not at Planet Fitness.
The interesting thing about it is that interview I got that from, he is so suntan, he almost looked like a black dude. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, boy. He was hitting the tanning bed back in the day. That's
no
important.
Kidding.
It really shows your vascularity, Brad.
No
and
kidding.
Your definition when
okay,
you do that.
We do have to get out of here. We're way past time.
See you guys on Tuesday.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?